I apologize. We are going to stream it, so we believe that the audio will go to YouTube. They will just see a black screen. They won't see any picture.
Okay, have it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so just give me a countdown.
Live in 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. My name is Pat Kemp, and I'm chair of the HART Board of Directors. Welcome to the July 18th, 2022 regular board meeting. The meeting format is hybrid. Quorum should be physically present in a short time at the HART administrative offices. The rest of the board members are participating via communication media technology. We'll call the meeting to order, and if you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and staff, if at this time you could do a roll call, please.
Mayor Castor, Director Frazier, Director Hudson, Director Johnson, Chair Kemp.
Here.
Director Knight.
Here.
Director Myers.
Here.
Director Overman.
Here.
Director Schistler.
Here.
Director Smith.
Here.
Director Vieira.
Here.
Director Williams.
Here.
There currently is no physical quorum in place at this time.
Thank you. We're expecting another member to come shortly, and then we will have a quorum. And I'll just let the public know also who may be listening, streaming online, that we do not at this time have video here, and or we have video issues. So there may not be video, but we hope that the meeting is you're able to hear it by audio. Okay, and with that, if we can move now to public comments. Do we have anyone here for public comment at this time?
There was a Mr. Blinch who signed up to speak, but I did not hear him on the line. Mr. Blinch, have you joined the call? Mr. Blinch, have you joined the call? I do not believe he's on, Madam Chair. So then I did not have anybody else pre-registered.
Okay, thank you. And we're not going to be able to approve the minutes at this time, nor the consent agenda. And we have action items after that, but we have one item, and I think I think it would be wise to just move to that one item that is not the action item at this time. The presentation. And I think I think we'll have enough time. I don't know how long this will last, but we might have to interrupted to go through with the action items at the time when they come, but I think we should start with that. So the presentation that we have at this time is the HART Network Evaluation Short-Term Service Plan. And Mr. Crawbones? Crawbones? I've been to Paris recently. I'll practice. Oh, sorry. There, shows what I know. There we go. All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow board members. My name is Tim Crowbons. I'm with Nelson Nygaard, and I'm here to present to you today the Network Evaluation and Short-Term Service study. We have a network evaluation results that we'd like to go through with you today. The items on our agenda is to go through some of the dashboards that we've created as part of the study. Dashboards in themselves are not all that important as much as the way we use them in doing our data analysis. We have a section on our market assessment that we've done, our service assessment. We'll talk near the end about service design guidelines and guiding principles, and then we'll end with next steps towards developing route recommendations. So the dashboard you see in front of you, again, this is one of the tools that we use. We look at ridership on a route level basis, a segment basis, a stop level basis. We're able to identify where service is most productive, where it's least productive. And what's really interesting about the tool we have here with this dashboard is we're able to kind of slice and dice this data, looking at it by day of week, time period of the day, by direction, by route. And we can also look at it across the day on a time basis in the bottom. I'm presenting these tools to you so you understand sort of the tools that we've used in our data analysis, and we come up with recommendations. These are things that we are looking at when we do this. Another dashboard looks at the boardings and lightings, the graphs on the left side, as well as the total on board at a given point in time. And that's the right side of that graph and the gray line that goes through the graph. We're able to understand where their load points may be on certain routes exceeding the load of the vehicle, whether it be seated load or seated and standing. And we're able to understand where we might look for frequency, opportunities to put more frequency in. Once again, we can slice and dice that by route, by day, by time period. One of the tools that we developed that we've used already is looking at on-time performance and running times in the system, and looking at on a trip level basis, on the segment level basis, and by time point, by route, looking at those routes that are running ahead of schedule, those that are running behind. In May of this year, we identified 11 routes that we went in and did some schedule adjustments. Some of them were very successful, some were sort of mediocre. And what we find in this case is that there's a lot of variables that affect on-time performance. Certainly traffic, signalization, accidents, trains. One of the routes that we worked on was the Route 8, has several train crossings. We have another batch of routes that we're looking at for on-time performance here for September, and we'll be implementing adjustments on those to improve the on-time performance. Now, this table is pretty detailed. I think the thing I want to point out here is that this is looking at comparisons of how HART serves the Hillsborough County in relation to a number of demographic variables. On the first column is your variables. The second column is either total or density. And third column represents Hillsborough County. 1.4 plus million people, a density of 2.2 people per acre. If you go to the right two columns, you'll see this is looking at the HART system at a quarter-mile radius of the bus stops and a half-mile. HART serves 31% of the population in the county within a quarter mile and nearly 50% within a half mile. Why we put this type of information together is we're specifically looking at how is HART serving the community, and are there areas where maybe it's underserving. And in particular, you can see looking at minorities, zero-car households, the percent columns are higher than those in the Hillsborough County, meaning that the HART system serves those populations to a greater degree than they are represented within the county. The area that is pretty much a little bit lower is elderly. And what we're finding in this case is there's a number of individuals that are aging in place that are not on bus routes today, and those elderly populations are challenged at accessibility. So things that we'll be looking at as our recommendations is there opportunities to put in on-demand services in communities to serve seniors better, as an example. So our market assessment is really based on a supply-demand approach. Supply meaning how much service you put out on the street, and we're doing this all on a census block group basis. So if you're familiar with that, there are geographic areas within the region that are defined with a number of things with population, employment, and then demographic characteristics. We compare that supply of service that HART puts on the street with demand. And we've done this in a number of different ways. 4 of the examples are activity-based, which would be more population and employment-based, analysis, needs-based, which is a number of variables, which we're going to go through in this presentation. We also did an onboard survey in September of last year. So we have information on how people are moving around on the bus system and their characteristics. Are they taking multiple routes, multiple transfers? So we understand where their origin is, where their boarding location is, where their alighting location is, and where their destination is. 4 pieces of information to understand how they're moving around the community. That helps us establish things like walk distances to transit, how many times they have to transfer to get around the system. The last area is LBS data. If you don't know what LBS is, it's location-based services data. It's the cell phone data that is tracking you around the community, not you individually, personally, but we do have data on how those cell phones are moving around the community, and it helps us understand, are there large travel markets within the community that are not served by HART in the existing transit system. So I'm going to take the supply-demand example, I'm going to carry it through this market assessment just to show you how we use it. On the supply side, specifically, we look at how many transit trips are being served to individual bus stops within a census block group. It allows us to provide a density, or trips per acre, a supply per acre. As you can see in the HART system, there is a pretty significant supply of services in the Florida-Nebraska corridor on the north-south, and even 56th Street up through Temple Terrace. And to a large extent on Hillsborough, Waters, East-West, Fletcher up by University of South Florida, because a lot of routes go through on Fletcher to get to the University Area Transit Center, and as well as downtown to Ybor City, which you have, the Route 5, the 6, the 8, the 9, the 12. They're all going through from downtown through that area and then dispersing elsewhere. So your supply is very heavy in these areas, and now we want to compare that to your demand. So specifically, we are looking at the needs demand part, and that is consistent of 6 variables. These 6 variables that we use to create a needs index. And you can look at them individually, but what we do is we try to pull them together into a complete index of all these variables. And so combining these 6 variables, you'll see in the map on the right, this is where the needs are in the community. And some of them align very well with where you're putting service out there, your supply. But there's also areas where there's needs where the supply is pretty low or non-existent. And you can see in the north-south, some of the corridors going from west to east, and then the east-west corridor is very similar to some of the corridors that were in the supply index too. So the next step when you look at supply and demand is how can you compare them together and combine them together. This is a very colorful map. It's interesting when you put the needs and supplies together, what you're really looking for is the darker pink colors, okay, or the brightest pink colors. If you look at the index in the bottom left, next to the word high, you see that pink fuchsia color there. If you're looking for those in the map, those are areas that don't have enough supply in relation to its demand. And for various reasons, those different characteristics, those 6 combined characteristics. And so oftentimes you can see this in systems along a corridor, but most times you see it in pockets. And so the challenge is how do you serve those pockets within a community, whether it be by existing routes, new routes, or on-demand services that might serve them best. We also look at this market assessment on the onboard survey. And I'm not going to delve into the details as much on the next couple, but suffice it to say, you can see where a lot of the onboard survey activity is by the heat map in the downtown area, Ybor City, up around the University Area Transit Center and USF, the Veterans Hospital, that Walmart near the University Area Activity Center or Transit Center. So we're looking at where is the activities for the existing riders as one piece of information when we put recommendations together. here's just a specific part of the onboard survey that we've taken out and looking at just specifically income levels. And the map stays very similar when you look at it. It's the graph that's on top of the map that's really the most important thing, is where do we see the lowest income individuals in the service? Individuals that service, they're dependent on that service for essential services, to get to jobs, to get to medical appointments, and just for basic needs of groceries and so forth. And so we really look at those areas to say, how are those people moving around the community, and does the transit system serve them well? Can they get around the transit system well from where their origins and their destinations are? Another aspect is looking at service assessment. And these graphs are sort of your typical graphs to show you boardings and lightings across a typical weekday. And it's distributed based on percentage. So if you add up all these bars, you get 100%. So as an example, approximately 7% or so occurs in the 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning weekday hour of boardings and lightings. The sort of blue line that goes across the graph is looking at your transit trips. And this is the supply of service in relation to the demand. And so those transit trips, if you look over in the PM period, those transit trips are still out there being provided where the demand starts to taper off. What we also looked at is the LBS trips, and looked at the cell phone data and how it is distributed across a 24-hour period in relation to transit trips and transit supply, which is the blue line. What's interesting is the cell phone data trips taper off in the evenings, much like the transit trips do. Yet the transit service continues to provide a higher level of service in the evening, even though the ridership is down and even though LBS or cell phone trips are down as well. That might mean that maybe we have too much service out there in the evenings on a number of the routes in relation to demand. And you can look at that on weekends as well. One of the things that's fairly interesting when you look at the weekday graph is there still appears to be a afternoon peak hour hump in transit trips. But in transit trips in the morning, that is sort of less prominent. We're seeing this all over the country. There still seems to be a lot of the trips in the PM period that are not necessarily all work trips. They could be, you know, errands and groceries and things like that. But those still exist post-COVID. I shouldn't say post-COVID because I don't think we're there yet. But this is something we're seeing all across the nation in all the systems we're doing analysis in. This is to kind of give you a sense that we don't just look at routes individually and say riders at a stop level or a segment level. We really look at it under a number of different metrics and compare those metrics by day of week. We break it down by time period. We look at what are the routes that are performing very well and what are the routes that are not performing very well, and why is that the case? Are there things that we can do to improve those that are not performing well and bring them up? The intent is always to bring those in the bottom, improve their performance, and keep bringing them from the bottom, improving the performance, and overall your system performance will go up. Another part of the service assessment is really looking at where is the ridership occurring. Now think back to the supply index map that I showed you earlier. Where are you putting a lot of your service? That service is occurring in your Florida and Nebraska corridors, right? Well, that's where you're getting your return on that service. You're getting a lot of ridership. What that tells me is where you put frequency, you get results. Where you don't put frequency, you don't get as good of results. Now, that's a blanket statement, and it's been that way for my whole career. I've seen that way. But there is some areas where you can put the frequency and they will not come because there's not enough density there, and the characteristics of the community wouldn't support transit. So we have to be very tactical in how we put services out in the street and really put it where we think we're going to get the best return on our investment. Those are some of the stops, the best producing stops in the system there on the left. So how do we go forward? we set up what we call right-size network guiding principles, okay? So the network that we're designing is within your existing resources. And as we take those resources, we are trying to look for opportunities to improve service productivity and put the right levels of service where it's needed in the system, as well as possibly designing some new routes in the system to cover some new corridors and some of those pink areas you saw on the earlier map where there was a lot of demand but not a lot of supply. How do we kind of bring those into the system and serve them best? And so these are some of the guiding principles that we look at when we're designing the system to be most effective. Some of the things that are most effective is frequency, but eliminating things like duplicative services. If we have a lot of services that converge on a corridor for a several mile segment, is there a better way to get those routes through that area to cover more area, as an example? Getting rid of unproductive or out of direction travel. Looking at the onboard survey, understanding where people start and where they end. Some of them are making some pretty long trips in the system with sometimes two, maybe even 3 transfers to get to the destination. Spending, 2 to 3 hours from their start of their trip to the end of their trip. That's really unacceptable. And time is the most important thing that we're trying to save here by redesigning some of the system. So our next steps, we've been in the process of putting together recommendations, and I gave you just a very flavor of the data analysis, probably a 10% flavor of the data analysis we've been going through. But we've been looking at all that data and coming up with some recommendations. And we've been working with the staff in getting some input as well on those. Some of them include alignment or segment elimination. Some of them are new routes, as I mentioned earlier. Frequency adjustments. In some cases, we may downgrade in frequency. In some cases, we may upgrade a frequency. And then span of service adjustments. We noticed that there's some routes that don't run as late as others, which leaves gaps in connectivity in the system. So you might be able to make those trips all day long, but then in the evening, your last segment, that route doesn't run, and you're kind of stuck. So we want to look at those kind of things and specifically identify a recommendation that might help people move around the system the entire length of its service time frame. With that, I open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions? Yes, Commissioner Knight. Director Knight.
Can't hear him.
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Yes.
Again, thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
Just curious to know how many of the ridership have cell phones?
That's a good question. This is a question we get everywhere when we use LBS data, cell phone data. What we're finding is that for the most part, probably 70, 80%, and it depends on the system. And honestly, that was a question we probably should have asked on the onboard survey, which wasn't asked. But the challenge with cell phone data is you're not going to get everybody. So it's just one data source. And we don't rely 100% on it to make our decisions. We use it as part of our decision-making process. But many, generally between 70 and 80% of the people generally have smartphones.
And Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. And there's just so many really interesting points that come out in here. I was trying to catch your eye when Adley, when he mentioned duplication, because we've had, kind of some questions about BRT on the interstate going on the same exact route that HART buses are, and that would actually be wasting our resources. What was very interesting to me is these maps, these studies. Slide 11 has the areas of high need but low supply, and slide 17, which is page 154 in my backup, is areas of high population but low jobs, where the county has been allowing residential development without planning to have jobs in the same location. In fact, it's as if Hillsborough County has been planning to have commuter subdivisions driving long distances into the job centers for a long, long time. In fact, that's what they've been doing until recently, when we're beginning to wake up to the problem of that. And so this has created areas of a lot of long distance car dependent commuters, and created them in the areas of some of the least expensive housing, where the land farther out, farmland in some cases, has been a lot cheaper, so the housing can be cheaper. But this is attracting people who can't afford to have a car and gasoline for every member of the household who needs to work and needs to go to the doctor and needs to get the kids to daycare. So when we talk about, and I think this, this really comes out of your report, that when we talk about transit-oriented development, as we are beginning to do here, we need to be considering both sides of that. We need to, yes, we're working on the bus emphasis corridors, and we want, to help us plan to put certain kinds of residential and commercial where we're planning to put bus stops within a short walk of a transit station, within the walk shed of bus stops. But also, equally important, we need, and this is Tampa, City of Tampa, as well as Hillsborough County, as well as school district concern, we need to stop sprawling the residential growth into areas where we cannot afford to provide transit. And so I think this report really helps show us that as well, areas that are never going to get transit in the next couple of generations of people. So we're allowing these low-income folks to be lured out to the distant suburbs with the dream of affordable, low-cost housing, and then dooming them to a life of limited access to jobs and or a lifestyle of long, costly commutes to jobs. The Tampa Bay Partnership study showed that we need to increase transit to increase the accessible pool of jobs that people can get to. But we have to be considering both sides of this, is what I'm saying, not just putting transit where the people are, but putting people where the transit's going to be, and also to stop the sprawl of people way the heck out from where the jobs are. And that involves the city as well. And they're all of us planning together to put people where the buses are going to be able to get people to work, and put the jobs together with that. So I think this report is really useful for that understanding. And also, another point is, as you noted, where you put frequency, you get ridership, and where you don't have frequency, you don't get riders. And so we have to, this isn't a simple report to really understand without taking the whole context of, well, when you're surveying the people who are taking the bus, we're not, in the first place, we're not capturing the people who would take transit if it were available. And when we survey the bus riders, we're going to find lower ridership where the bus service is hourly rather than more frequent. So it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a potential pool of customers somewhere, just looking at where our current customers are saying they travel the most and take the bus the most. So the last thing I'll note is that was interesting to me, the one population that is served at a lower percentage than its percentage in the county is the elderly. The next lowest is to the disabled, but I guess it's hard for me to understand this, so I'll throw this back to you. I guess this is measured within the population of our people served. What percentage of our customers is elderly, or how are you measuring that?
This is the percentage of elderly and disabled individuals that are within either a quarter or a half mile of fixed route transit. Now, that doesn't mean they're not served by HART. HART may serve them with paratransit services. Right. And so that's a broader range of coverage area. So it's very possible that individuals fall just outside of that half mile range or quarter mile range, and they still are getting services through paratransit.
Right. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. And Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. Thank you. The data geek in me is really excited about this information because I think it's hugely valuable for us to understand, given that the highest ridership is obviously where we have the highest frequency. There's a correlation, and I appreciate that. But one of the things that I noticed in this that I think is really important for long-term planning, Commissioner Smith made work towards that direction when we were talking about areas that we have 1 hour service and bottom route performance indicators as as shown on I don't know what slide, it's slide 15, I guess it is, but where you're talking about the key indicators and you look at the bottom routes. Bottom routes on most cases in this illustration that I could just look at are those that are caught up in traffic. Not only do they, and bottom routes isn't necessarily, if people can't get on that bus and that bus can't get through traffic and consequently it's late or not performing in its top element, they're not going to use it because they're going to get late to work or they're going to miss a doctor appointment or they're not going to, they won't take that risk if they have a choice, if they have another way to get around. So when we look at the bottom routes, that's the Bloomingdale to South Tampa LX, the South County 41, the New Tampa Limited Express, the Fish Hawk to South Tampa, and the Brandon Boulevard. And then there were a couple of others that look like were the Armenia Howard Avenue. And yeah, that was the only, and almost the Cypress Street routes. All of those routes are in constrained routes. Specifically, the Brandon Boulevard one, and they are underperforming, and it may be that long term they need a protected lane. They may not be a BRT per se, but in looking at how they're able to deliver services on a rapid basis to those that are ridership that's there, because the ridership doesn't look like a bad number. On the weekdays, the weekends not so much, but on the weekdays, you've got good ridership, it looks like, but it's not able to be, it's not picking up in terms of performance, and that may be because it's getting stuck in traffic. So I think what's really valuable here is to do two things. One, in areas where there is ridership, but performance is not there enough, we still have to recognize that, to Commissioner Smith's point, people have been able to afford to move to those areas, but they still need access to transit. And if the road design is the impediment for being able to rely on that transit, it's something that we need to look at long term, where certain areas do have a redesign of the road in order to facilitate having either a dedicated bus line or a lane that is shared with the emergency vehicles, or they get the light preferences to be able to get through because they are longer distance routes. And there's a large population of folks in South County that would really love to have more service than they have now, but the 1 hour just doesn't work. The other issue that relates to that is that, as some of you may know, the county is looking at its housing policy and its bus emphasis corridor policy that is based on frequency. And for any part of the unincorporated Hillsborough County area, the frequency that you get, the density, doesn't exist in Hillsborough County right now. They're talking about, 20 to 30-minute intervals, and there isn't that in the unincorporated county. So I think it's going to be important for us to look at show where the performance is there. And if we ultimately have the revenue to increase the frequency, we're still going to need to address access where those bottlenecks can occur. For example, on the Brandon Boulevard route, it looks like, it's got decent ridership, but it's seeing some challenges maybe because of the access to the roads and getting stuck in traffic. So I really appreciate this particular illustration because it does show not only where we're most productive, but how we might plan for the future when it comes to increased ridership, the demand, and how we go about providing that long term. But terrific analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's see, Director Hudson.
Thanks. As you've heard, we obviously have a real poverty of mobility in this community, and I'm curious how important densifying areas where there is already a high supply of transit, how important is that? Knowing that HART's not a land use regulator, and so that obviously wasn't in your guiding principles. Is that something that we should be pushing for? Or?
I believe so, and the reason is that it allows people in higher density areas more options and to make decisions to maybe not have two cars, maybe have one, or maybe not even have a car in those areas. But densification in specific corridors is going to support that transit service, but those individuals in those corridors are going to want to have a system to get around. And if you're only providing frequency where the density is, then it's still not a valuable option for them because they can't get around the network in a convenient manner. So the priority for doing that would be to increase frequencies across a lot of the system, including the higher density corridors. I would just say one thing on the previous comments is that some of the poorer performing routes are actually some of the express routes. And COVID related to some extent, but there is also another reason why they perform poorly is because they're very limited in the number of trips that there's being provided out there. If you were to go back to the 80s and the 90s, you would see there was probably 12 trips in the morning and 12 trips in the afternoon on each express routes. Today, there's 3, 4 at most. And what that does to people is it doesn't leave them confident that if they miss their trip, they can catch the next one, because there may not be a next one. And so it's a frequency, it's a means of frequency, but it's through express services over a larger span. So that would be part of the explanation, besides COVID, obviously, hitting the commuter markets. And the point about traffic congestion and so forth, there are a lot of ways, putting transit priority on the buses so that they can move through intersections a little bit faster is another way to kind of move the transit along too.
Okay, I just, I can't wait to really delve into it more. It's just, I absolutely love seeing this and seeing the heat maps and the data and the comparisons and understanding. I'll just, I almost don't know where to begin with any of the things. I'm not going to go on because I looking for the more fine tuning as we see it. And I think you just raised lots of issues about our system and how we can look at it in the future. I have to say that I just got back from 10 days in Amsterdam, which, to my amazement, is 900,000 people in the city, and in the urban area, 1.5 million, which is Hillsborough County. But they had ferries running everywhere for free, packed with bicycles. They had trams, arterial, light rail, whatever, on all the streets everywhere, multiple routes all the time. Lining the tram systems in the center were articulated double buses everywhere coming up and down. Above, they had major rail systems like the CSX, 3 at once, going in different directions everywhere. And it took me a week to discover, and I almost couldn't believe it, that I was directed down to a metro system underground, which I didn't even understand existed, and it was massive, and I was stunned. So, but that's an area that has a population that's equal to Hillsborough County. And that is not to mention that 60% of people apparently get to their places on bicycles, which were everywhere, as well as all kinds of vehicles that were like little teeny smart cars that fit 2 people, that, or different ways for paratransit to happen in the bike lanes, because they were limited to about 20 miles an hour is all the vehicles could do. So when I come back and I'm thinking about this, and I'm saying this is an area that, you know, they can afford to provide all this transit. And by the way, it's all packed all the time, as well as bicycles. Like, that is where you really have to be careful about not getting hit, because it's, you know, there might not be any for a minute, and then there's 20 going 30 miles an hour. I don't, you know, it's just pretty incredible. But I was really interested too in about what you were speaking about, mobility with the elderly. A little concerned that you talked about it being on demand, because of the expense and cost of that, and I'm not sure what that meant exactly. But also, from what I've understood about express routes across the country and systems, they never have the ridership that, you know, because they're usually used for commuter purposes in work. So I can understand the difference between 3 and 9, but I also looked at I've looked at for a while at the ridership between downtown St. Pete and Tampa, and they have 9 going a day, at least last time I checked. All this has been, and I'm glad they have it. They only have 4 stops. It goes walkable place to walkable place, but it's still far lower than, for instance, Florida Avenue with, you know, and the use of that route. So I think there's just a lot to unpack here, and I'd like to emphasize to Commissioner Smith, you know, we probably need to have this intersect after we get a better handle on this. Presentation maybe at the county commission, the city council might want to do the same and involve, you know, look at this in a really more holistic manner about our future development. And I have been as well concerned about the express routes on the routes on the interstate that have been promised to compete with our local arterial rate transit, which to me doesn't make any sense when you have a starved system that you would invest any resources in that right now. So that's all just a bunch of things throwing, you know, thoughts that come to mind about this. But thank you so much. I am very excited to see the future and to kind of see what we can do to make the best possible system with our resources to serve the most people in the best way. And it's been a big challenge for a long time, but this gives me it's a lot of interest and hope for what we can do.
Thank you for having me today.
Thanks. And seeing that, we will move. We're going to switch up the agenda a little here, because Commissioner Smith will lose our quorum, but I think actually we'll make it all through. But we're going to move to next to our certifying the proposed ad valorem tax millage rate for the fiscal 2023 budget. And okay, and we're calling on the presentation for that. And Ms. LeGrand, are you doing, Ms. Kirk? Thank you. I can't wait to look at those slides more.
Good morning, Chair Kemp, members of the board, and Ms. LeGrand. This is the annual presentation on HART's proposed ad valorem tax millage rate. Just a few things I want to cover this morning. The history, of course, of the ad valorem rate, the proposed rate for fiscal year 23, the next steps in the board resolution that we asked you to consider today. This slide gives you several years of information related to the ad valorem tax for fiscal years 2016 to fiscal year 21, and then we have the budget for fiscal year 22 and the proposed rate for fiscal year 23. For fiscal year 23, we're proposing to keep the millage rate at 0.5000, consistent with prior years. The taxes to be levied at the proposed millage rate total $68,820,327. And consistent with board policy, we would budget at 95% of the proposed rate. So we would include in the budget $65,379,311. And you can see that's a 14.8% increase over past years. In terms of next steps, we are required, and those of you who are familiar with the TRIM process, we're required by August the 4th to certify the taxable rates to the property appraisal. On that same date, we'll provide the prior year and current year proposed millage rate. We'll provide the current year rollback rate, and we will announce the date, time, and location of the public hearings. We do plan to have our first public hearing on September 12th. We'll hold that public hearing, and during the public hearing, the board will be asked to act on the proposed millage rate and the tentative budget. And then our final public hearing will be September 26th. And during that public hearing, we'll ask the board to adopt the final millage rate for fiscal year 23 and the final budget for fiscal year 23. But the important thing, of course, here is to consider the proposed millage rate of 0.5. And as you can see, that will produce $68.8 million, and we'll budget at $65.4 million.
Schisler, move to approve the tentative millage rate.
We have a motion by Director Schisler to approve.
Can't hear you, Commissioner Kemp. Still can't hear her.
We can't hear you, Ms. Kemp.
We have a motion. I didn't have my mic. We have a motion by Director Schisler, a second by Councilman Vieira, Councilman Schisler. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, can we please do a roll call vote?
Yes, and just for the record, this is resolution number R 2022-07-61. Chair Kemp?
Yes.
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yeah.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move next because we have a lot of items on it. They've all been reviewed before to our consent agenda. If we have any motion with regards to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda by Commissioner Overman.
Schisler, second.
Okay, Commissioner
second.
Overman made a motion, seconded by Commissioner Myers, to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, can we please do a roll call vote?
Chair Kemp?
Yes?
Director Overman?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Vieira?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And because I'm worried about our quorum here. I'm going to move to action item number 6 here today for the board's consideration. Staff's bringing forward this action item, and that's Ms. LeGrand will do the presentation. Resolution R 2022-7-60 to authorize staff to perform negotiations and award the external auditor services contract to Cherry Becker LLP as recommended by the Auditor Selection Committee. Ms. LeGrand.
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, board members. Good morning, staff. This is a resolution to approve the staff to negotiate and award the contract to Cherry Becker, who's served as our external auditor for the last 5 years. Their contract expired. The board created an auditor selection committee, and the board selected this firm to move forward, and we're just looking for approval so we can actually finalize the process with awarding the contract.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
And who,
Second.
Director Hudson, did you move approval on that?
Yes, Chair.
Director Hudson, and seconded by Councilman Schizler. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. And hearing no further comments at this time, can we please take a roll call vote?
Chair Kemp,
Yes.
Director Overman,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Knight,
Yes.
Director Myers,
Yes.
Director Schissler,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Vieira. Yes. The motion passes unanimously.
Good work we're doing here. I'll go back and move for, is there anyone to move approval of the minutes at this time?
Move approval.
Schissler, move to approve.
Director Hudson moved approval, and I think I heard some others, but second by Councilman Schizler. And hearing no further comments with regards to this, can we please do a roll call vote?
Chair Kemp,
Yes.
Director Overman,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Knight,
Yes.
Director Myers,
Yes.
Director Schissler,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Vieira. Yes. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I think we've done all our action items. Is that correct? Yes, so we're going to move at this time. We have other reports, but I think we'll move first to our legal report. I understand that we have Mr. Smith on the line at this time to report with regards to the sales tax.
Yes, David Smith is on the line and is going to give a report on the status of the Office of Transportation litigation.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. By the way, I'll try to keep this short for you. I think many of you
Actually, it's a little bit loud, maybe. It's distorting a bit.
Well, let me move the volume down or quit talking so loudly, one of the two.
Or maybe
Is
just
this-
move a little bit away from the source.
Is this better?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better.
All right, perfect. I will try to keep this short because I think many of you have been following this issue as it has appeared in the press and otherwise. By way of background briefly, you may recall that towards the end of the legislative session, there was a budget proviso passed, which indicated that the Department of Revenue would submit an amended budget allowing for the disbursement of all the surtax revenues consistent with the requirements of, I believe it was Florida Statute Section 212.55. If you recall, Section 212.55 was the section that we litigated over, and the outcome of the case was that because the county commission did not adequately address all of the expenditures, it was not a valid tax. That's a good thing in this instance because that indicates that the revenue will go back to the county commission for allocation pursuant to the applicable statute, which in light of the circumstances is a win, given the fact that the surtax was not sustained in the first place. Our court judge, Judge Barbas, the Sixth Circuit Court, unfortunately had to enter a final order when the budget proviso was passed. And we filed a motion for him to revoke or amend that and address the issue dealing with how the money would get to the clerk so it could get to the Department of Revenue. The only other case pending, one of the things the proviso required is that a court of competent jurisdiction enter a final judgment. It's our view that the only court that meets that test was the Sixth Circuit here in Hillsborough County. There was a case pending in Tallahassee, but in Tallahassee, none of the other parties other than the clerk and I think maybe the Hillsborough County were parties to it. So we think the issue, the final judgment had to come from the Sixth Circuit. So he's issued that order. He's required that all of the local governments that receive payments return those funds to the clerk of the circuit court, who will then disperse those to the Department of Revenue, who will then act pursuant to the budget proviso and will allocate those funds to Hillsborough County for expenditure consistent with the statute that serves as the basis for the surtax. So that was a quick summary of where we're at. I believe that HART has either transferred or will transfer no later than today the funds that we hold, which are significant, and that we will then be in a position to move forward. There is still a class action lawsuit pending in Tallahassee, filed by the class action attorneys. We are not a party to that lawsuit. Part of the effort to get that lawsuit dismissed was the argument that the local venue jurisdiction, which would be for Hillsborough County and the clerk and others, required that the hearing be held in the county in which that local governmental entity was located. There was an argument made that the Department of Revenue's home venue was in Tallahassee, so basically that was stalemated for a while. There's other reasons that lawsuit has been subject to a motion to dismiss. Again, we're not parties to that, so we're not involved in that as directly, and we will see how that comes. I mention that simply because you should probably be aware, I'm sure there will be an effort by the class action attorneys to obtain compensation for their efforts in one form or another. And there seems to be some sympathy in that regard for some of the political actors on the other side. But hopefully the revenue will be provided to DOR. There will be little or no revenue taken away for class action attorneys. It will be returned to the county for expenditure consistent with the statute. And we hope all of that will happen because the time frame for the DOR to put in a budget amendment is September 1. So all of this should be happening pretty quickly. And hopefully there will be some money available in the fall for use on transit and transportation issues consistent with the statute. That's kind of the quick and dirty of it. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I see Commissioner Overman has a question. Be careful what you ask for.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation, David. I think it was very helpful for the public to understand that it's on its way to the Department of Revenue, and the Legislative Committee will be making a decision on how it's spent. I'm hoping that obviously it's been spent with our short-term and long-term transportation plans, but it's going to be up to that committee to do so. Today at 5 p.m. is the deadline for the monies that we have been holding in reserve as a result of the surtax. Is HART going to be able to meet that deadline and get the funds? And it's well, all the money was set aside that we received to the clerk today by 5 p.m.
I think Ms. LeGrand is probably better positioned to answer that.
It's for staff.
This is Loretta Kirk. To Chair Kemp and the board members, yes, we will send that money today. We did a test transaction on Friday because it is $219 million. And I certainly didn't want to do it in one transaction. So we sent $1 to the clerk of courts on Friday. They did receive it, and we'll send the rest of the money. But the total that we're sending today is $219,157,070.
Okay, great. Thank you. And that's the result of those dollars coming to us, I assume. Was there some question about the interest that accrued on that and that going as well? I've heard that there might be a question there.
Yes, there was a question there, and the consensus, matter of fact, was almost unanimous among the local government entities, was that it was appropriate to return the interest because the interest was interest on the funds ostensibly obtained pursuant to an illegal tax. So everybody is returning the interest with that. unfortunate in a sense for HART because I think our interest was over $2 million, but we didn't want to be the only entity not sending the interest in either. That would not have gone well, and I think that is the appropriate response in light of the circumstances.
And thank you very much. Well, while it seems terrible to have the money go away, the good news is that there might be a shot of having it come back. And so I thank you. I also want to reiterate from our position that having, the dollars that taxpayers paid go to lawyers that have cost us enormous amount of dollars in time for not being able to invest those dollars seems inappropriate and a bad use of taxpayer dollars. So I'm hoping that the decision is that this comes back to Hillsborough County and in line with our long-term and short-term transportation needs. And it means HART will get its opportunity to move forward. So thank you very much for pursuing this. And that's where I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Ms. Mandel, is there anything else with regards to the General Counsel's report?
Yes, I just wanted to make one more comment. This relates to the memorandum I sent on June 24, 2022, regarding the employee complaints that were submitted to the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners, but were not sent to the remainder of the directors of HART. Obviously, those were sent out to you all on June 24, 2022. They were also submitted to the HART administration for them to review and investigate, which I understand is ongoing, but just wanted to let you know the status of that. And if we were to have any additional conversations about those issues, we probably are better served having those offline so as they are pending review. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further comments, we'll move to sole source procurement and one-time deviation from the procurement manual, or any that there were. Ms. LeGrand.
Yes. So you have in front of you the report, and you see that we had one sole source award in June for approximately $45,000, and this is for Industry Safe LLC, and it's a safety software. And our year-to-date for sole source awards is approximately $1.1 million. I did want to ask, since we've been presenting this for over a year now, if the board was comfortable, staff would recommend moving this report under item number 13, monthly information report, and then that way the board will be able to see the sole source report in that section, but we won't have to go through and present it. But again, this is up to the board. If you're comfortable with that, we will move it into the monthly information report.
Anyone uncomfortable with that? Seeing none, I guess we can, move that into the monthly. With that, we'll move to the chair's report. I'm sorry, with the Chief Executive Officer's report, CEO, Ms. LeGrand.
All right. Well, again, good morning. And, we're just working, as you can tell, tirelessly to get through this budget process and making sure that this cycle is very, I would say, inclusive of the entire organization. So as you walk through the building today, you may have seen some easels set up. We're going to do our second round of internal public engagement on our budget. So we'll have 4 sessions internal to the organization. The first one is happening today here at EBOR at 3 o'clock. And then we have 3 more sessions on 21st, 7 a.m., 1 p.m., and then the 7:30 p.m. session. So again, our intention here, just like the public meetings Mr. Kirk spoke about in September, is to ensure that our entire organization is a part of our budget process. They understand how we build a budget, what goes into the budget. In our last session, there were some comments, I would say, from some of our employees as far as some items they wanted to see in the budget. And we are going to go back with them today and tomorrow to share with them how their comments found their way in the budget process. So we are excited about this. A couple of long nights and early days, but it is a great engagement opportunity, and we've gotten some very good, I would say, feedback from the team as far as what they would like to see. One thing I can mention is that one of the comments was to get better seats in the driver break room. on 21st Street. And last week, I did see the guys setting up those new chairs, and I got to sit in one, and it was very comfortable. So we were able to get that accomplished in our FY22 budget. But again, that's just showing that, you know, sometimes all it takes is to have a conversation and you realize you can do something right now. So I'm looking forward to this evening. So just wanted to share that with you. And we are also on schedule for our TDP update. We have been working with the consultant as well as an internal team. This was more of a collaborative effort. So we are doing some of the heavy lifting as well as the consultant to stay within an affordable budget and making sure that the plan reflects the organization as well. So this is, again, an opportunity where the whole team has been a part of setting our goals and our objectives, and that will be in our 10-year plan. So we're looking forward to getting our draft document completed by August 1, and hopefully at the next board meeting, I'll be able to give you an update on that as well. So those are my comments, and looking forward to the next couple of weeks of pulling all this stuff off.
Okay. I see no questions or comments by the board members at this time, and I already did the chair's reporting on Amsterdam, so I'm going to let it go with the Amsterdam comparison to Hillsborough County, and we can keep trying to move forward in a stronger, better direction. I'm really pleased about the movement we've been taking and where we've been going to. I think we're doing lots of good work here. With that, any old business? Any new business?
Chair Kemp?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's all right. This is Gil Schultz. Perhaps regarding Ms. LeGrand's request to move the monthly sole source report, could we possibly continue to get that for the audit and finance and audit committee?
That's an excellent idea, I think.
And then that way it still bubbles to the surface, but maybe not to the entire board, but that's something that we can look at. If there's any issues, we can deal with them, and if the board needs to know, bring it forward then.
I think that's a really good suggestion. Obviously, it was put in the agenda because there were some issues in the past, but to make it part of the Finance Committee, we took no official action or anything, so Ms. LeGrand is shaking her head, yes. So I think that's a great place for it to be. So thank you for that suggestion. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
And Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. You'll notice in your reports today the minutes of the TBARTA information as my appointment to TBARTA. I thought it would be wise to bring it to the board's attention. You take a look at those reports. But I would like for new business to, in the future, not anytime soon, I don't think it's urgent, but given many of the things that's happening at TBARTA, that it might be wise to ask Executive Director David Green to come and present to the board a progress report on TBARTA to give us some idea of how they're managing, given their their budget request was vetoed, and they are working on a project regarding the right-of-ways for the two rail transit lines, the Brooksville line and the Clearwater line. I think bringing the board up to speed on where they are with those projects this fall would be appropriate. So if the team could reach out to Mr. Green and see when an appropriate time would be to come back to present to the board where they are, I think there will be some value in that conversation. So with that, that was my only for new business item that I had.
Okay, and I'll just, I know there's an article, I guess, in the paper. I haven't even had a chance to read it this morning about the, where one of the biggest promoters regionally with TBARTA, Commissioner Long in Pinellas, is now calling for it to be disbanded. And as a TBARTA member for 5 years now, representing Hillsborough County, I have advocated for that for probably about 3 of the years once I realized the bureaucratic waste and you know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. TBARTA as an organization, it's duplicative and bureaucratic, and I think a waste of our resources, and has been attempting to set up routes competitive with HART that we would somehow in Hillsborough County pay them to run and privatize. I'm not sure what the whole plan is, but anyway, I think there's a move afoot maybe to do that and to dissolve T-BARTA, which I think would be a benefit actually for the region, for transit, truly. And at this time, though, they haven't taken any move, Commissioner Overman, on a rail plan at all, which is the latest information. We have not any kind of official study undertaking it or anything like that, but I do think it will.
That at Friday's meeting, there was much discussion about that, and that's why I would like to actually have the executive director come talk about it, because there is still value in the van pool that provides transit service or transit access to mobility for our military force down in MacDill, given the fact that we have limited housing for affordability for our servicemen and women that work at MacDill. The van pool service is is growing extremely well, and there is progress on the RFQ for the rail transit. So the part of having T-BARTA not be as effective in the past is because we haven't actually looked at the potential use of the infrastructure that's available on a regional basis until recently. So I think there's an opportunity. So
and with the van pool wouldn't go away. It would just be adopted, I think, by other organizations, perhaps HART. I think it would make a lot of sense. But with that, we can look at that. And if there are any more comments, seeing no comments, this meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.